Hi everybody, Nolan here, and what I'd like to do with you in this video is show you how to deal with line graphs in Excel. There's some troubleshooting that I'll show you how to do. There's a handful of issues in Excel that for the life of me I can't figure out, but I've figured out some workarounds to make line graphs just easier to deal with. So what we want to be able to do in this video is evaluate if a line graph is appropriate for a given data set. We want to be able to create and format a single line graph in Excel that's fairly easy. We also want to be able to create and format a multiple line graph in Excel. We can even change a multiple line graph in Excel to sort of an integrated multi-graph display. I'll show you how to do that as well. And then finally, we want to be able to paste a line graph from Excel into a PowerPoint or Word document. So let's begin. So over here, I have my data that I've begun to punch in here. And let's say I want to create a graph out of this. We need to decide, is a line graph appropriate, or what kind of graph is appropriate. So in this situation, I have some kind of experimental results where I have a temperature in degrees Celsius, and then I have a resultant crystal mass. So maybe we're growing some crystals, and we want to report what mass comes from what temperature. Well, this data set would not be appropriate for a line graph, and the reason for that is that generally speaking, a line graph is when you show a change over time. And if we are looking at just temperature and mass, there's no time component, so it's not likely that we could report this as a line graph. This would probably be more appropriate as a bar graph, or perhaps as a scatter plot. And just as a reminder for how to deal with data in cells, you would never put your units in the cells. So I would never say 35 degrees Celsius, and I would never go over here and put a G for grams, or whatever in the actual cell. Excel doesn't know how to deal with these. So you have to keep numbers only, and just make sure your units are included in the columns above your data so that that data is actually outside of the cells. So these data would not be appropriate for a line graph. So let's look at some data that would be appropriate for a line graph. Okay, so here we have another set of data. And I actually have time involved. So I've got years over on this column, and I have a biodiversity, this is the Shannon Weiner Index, that I have displayed over here. So we're showing that per year, right, our biodiversity is changing. And never mind that I have this blank for 2014. I'll show you how to deal with that in case you have a gap in your data. So this is something that I can create a line graph with, and I probably should. So to create any kind of chart in Excel, all you have to do is just click and drag with the left mouse button and highlight all your data. This is going to give me a single line graph. And I'm going to go to Insert. And this is where we run into trouble right away, because for the life of me, I don't know why Excel does this. But if I have time and then my other column here, and I go and I find line graph over here in our charts, and I just, let's say, select the first one, look what garbage Excel has given me. It has tried to plot the year as a line and also biodiversity as a line. This makes no sense at all. I want year on this axis. I don't want it plotted as its own line. Now, what I can try to do, it's not great, but it's something that I can sort of do. I can just highlight biodiversity, and I can go, okay, insert line graph. This does get me kind of a graph, something like what I want. However, there's still no years on the x-axis. So this is infuriating to me. If anyone has an explanation for why Excel does this, please feel free. I invite you to leave a comment in the comment section to explain why. I don't know why this is so hard to just get a line graph that has years on the time on the bottom and then your responding variable on the y. I have no clue. But I have two workarounds. One of these I just discovered this morning, posted by a YouTube creator by the name of, I hope I'm pronouncing this correctly, Lofty Garzon. What he says is that you can add an apostrophe at the beginning of the years, and that will fix your graph. So thank you for that tip. Let's try that really quick over here. So if I come over to my years and I just go ahead and add an apostrophe to the beginning of each one. Okay, so I've added an apostrophe to all my years, and I'm going to highlight that again. Let's try this one more time. Come over to line. That looks a little bit more like what I want. I've got my line graph. I have the actual years on the bottom. I've got my biodiversity on the y. I'll show you how to format this a little bit better. So this is a bit more like what I want. But I'll show you another workaround that if you don't want to go through and add apostrophes to each one of your times, this is actually, I think, a quicker and easier workaround. Okay, so I've gone through, I've deleted all of those apostrophes. Now I just have these numbers in the years. So this is my workaround that I actually prefer. is I will go over here to scatter plots, even though strictly speaking we wouldn't use a scatter plot for a line graph. This is the best workaround for me. You can select a scatter plot that has lines connected, and you can either have those smoothed so that it's actually showing sort of more of a gradual change, or you can connect those in a way that's not smooth, so you actually have these kind of harsher angles. This works for me. It is identical in every way to the line graph I just showed you by adding apostrophes. It's just a different chart type. So this is my preferred way to deal with this. I'll get into formatting in a second, but what if you have a gap in your data like this? So we notice in 2014 we don't have any data. If this doesn't bother you, if this suits your purposes, that's fine. You might not want that big gap in there. So the way that I would deal with that is this. Get rid of your graph, delete that missing year or the missing data, and then smush these together into one table again. Highlight all that, insert. Let's come back to our scatter plot with connected lines, and now now Excel has bridged those 2 points just right through that gap. So now let's talk about formatting. If I wanted to format this graph and do some other things with it, what could I do? There's some basic things that you can do. If I click on the background of my graph and go to Home, now I have some font and color options. You can color the background of the graph. In my case, I really don't want that colored. Or you can change the text. Let's say maybe I want it, sort of a dark purple color. Okay, and maybe I want it bold. You can change the font size of all of these numbers and text in the graph by just clicking the up arrow on the font size here, or the down arrow. That'll make everything the same font size. Or if you want to individually change individual axes, you can click the axis, and then you can maybe change the font size here. You can change which font you want. I like Cambria, so maybe if we grab some Cambria here, there we go. So I've changed that axis to Cambria. Or I could change the font of the whole thing, grab whatever I want. So that's a little bit with formatting. If you wanted to change the color of your points or your lines, let's say I want to change the color of my points, all I have to do is right-click on that, go to Format Data Series, and now there's a whole universe of different options available to me. So I can click this paint can. I can change the line. Maybe you want a dashed line. I've got a dash line now. Maybe you want to change the color of the line. There's lots of things you can do. Or maybe if I want to change the point itself, I just have to go to Marker. And let's say that I want a solid black line marker that has no fill. So no fill. So now I've got these markers, unfilled markers here, right? So there's all kinds of ways that you can play with formatting. I don't have time in this video to go into all that. But there's still things missing with my graph. I don't have access titles. And so to add access titles, I just click this little plus sign up here and click on access titles. You can add other things. You can add data labels. You can add error bars. You can add a legend. You can add a trend line if you want. A trend line would not be appropriate to add for a line graph, but not generally. So here we have some things that I've added, and you can name the titles over here. Just kind of treat it like a little text box. So we can say biodiversity SW index. And then down here, I can go with, year. All right. All kinds of other ways I can format. And then my title's not a very good one, but let's just leave it as it is. So that kind of deals with the formatting. In a moment, I'll show you how to copy and paste this over to a Word document or a PowerPoint. But let's look at a slightly more sophisticated set of data and how I would go about graphing that if I have multiple lines or if I actually want to integrate different graph types together. So I'm going to come over here to a new set of data. Again, I've got time over here in this column, which tells me a line graph would be appropriate. This is months. I also have 2 different resultant data points here. I've got my temperature, and I also have my average precipitation. So this is going to give me a climatograph. This is going to give me a display that shows how a location's weather patterns change throughout the year, what its climate looks like. So to create this graph, I'm going to highlight everything, right? Make sure everything's all highlighted. Once again, as a reminder, I've included units up here in the headings of the columns, not in the actual cell data. You don't want to do that. So I can highlight everything. Now, for a miracle, if you set up the graph in this manner, in months, if that's our time, and you come over here to the actual line graph function, Excel graphs this correctly. Again, I'm not quite sure why. You can do it this way. You can use that line function, or like I showed you earlier, you can use a scatter plot just as well. Go over here to our scatter plot function. Let's do connected lines, and there we go, right? We really get the same thing. But let's use the line graph because that's what Excel really ought to be made for. So I'm going to do my double line graph. Beautiful. Got my graph. Now, this graph has one or two issues. We can do things like add excess titles. We can change all the fonts and all that stuff. But what's bothering me is that the temperature is mashed all the way down at the bottom, and the average precipitation is kind of extended all the way at the top. So this makes it harder to kind of see the temperature. The temperature numbers are so much smaller than the precipitation numbers. So to fix this, there's two things that I'm going to do. One thing I'm going to do is I'm going to plot this precipitation on its own axis. So that's going to set up a new axis on the right side, and I'll show you how to do that. Just right-click the line. Just go to Change Series Chart Type. That's what we're going to select. So Change Series Chart Type. And then click here, Secondary Axis, for the data points that you want on a secondary axis. So for us, it's average precipitation. That's usually the one that I choose, the one that's way up higher on the chart. I don't think it really matters that much. But now that I've done that, what you see is that it's raised the temperature up because it plotted these really high numbers, the precipitation numbers, way over on their own y-axis on the right. So now we've got precipitation and temperature kind of occupying the same space. It's a little easier to see that temperature data. But we're not done. Let's say that I actually want to display the precipitation as a different kind of chart on the same graph. We can do a mixed chart where we have a line graph superimposed on something else. So what I can do here is I can take my line graph for precipitation, which maybe I don't want as a line, and I'm just going to right-click on that line, just like I did before to change this onto its secondary axis. Right-click on that line, click on Change Series Chart Type, and what I now have the option to do is actually change the precipitation value to something else, maybe let's say a bar graph, and click OK. So now what I've done is I have superimposed the temperature data as a line against the precipitation data as bars here. This is sort of how a classic climatograph is displayed. And then you can change all your formatting from here. So at this point, we are able to evaluate if a line graph is appropriate, create and format a single and multiple line graph in Excel. Now we just need to be able to learn how to paste a line graph from Excel into a PowerPoint or Word document. This is very easy to do. All that I typically do is I right-click on the graph space area in the background, go to Copy, and then over here in my target document, you can paste. So you can choose two options. You can either paste with formatting, that first option. In that case, you can change all the same formatting that you can change in Excel. Or if you don't want to be able to do that, just right-click and then click that last option and paste as an image. And that means that you actually can't change any formatting in this image. So I hope that this video has been helpful to you and that you feel a little bit more confident about dealing with line graphs in Excel.